What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope you guys are well. What's up, Ron? Jay Cleveland, what's going on? Victor, Victor Creed, that's dope. Kiel, what's happening? Hope everybody's well. Just wanted to get in a quick hit on a couple of things going on today. Um, last night I had a great panel of brothers, BGS Sidmore, Green Gorilla, Dr. Ronald Neal, Marcus Aurelius. We had a great conversation. And in that conversation, one of the things Green Gorilla talked about was sometimes needing to take a break from all of this, the strain, the difficulty, of focusing on the ills in Black male life. And I can definitely understand that. What's up, Keeping 100? Yep, what's the word? Malika, good to see you, man. Hybrid Ninja, what's up? Prince Johnny, what's going on? Yeah, and I could definitely resonate with what he was saying, because some of this gets difficult. And although you guys know, or you should see from the thumbnail, I'm going to be dealing a little bit with Chris Ryan and Ryan Coogler. But before that, man, there's something that just came across my desk that really, I just had to share. It's hard to look at, but it is what it is. So, even though it wasn't planned, check this out. So, this is an article, as you can see, breaking911.com, dated March 10th, today, 2022. Minnesota woman learns punishment after she locked her 8-year-old son in a garage to freeze to death. This is so ridiculously sad and frustrating at the same time. So when I was reading it, I was resonating with Green Gorilla, because I run across a lot of these cases, but sometimes, for some strange reason, some of them hit to the gut worse than others. Minneapolis, Minnesota, on Tuesday, Tasha Tenen was sentenced to 103 months in prison for causing the death of her child on February 1st, 2018, Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman announced. Tenen, 39, of Brooklyn Park, pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter on November 30th, 2021. For the 103-month prison sentence, Tenen will receive 17 days of credit for time already served. According to the criminal complaint, Tenen contacted police and paramedics on February 1st, 2018 at approximately 7:30 a.m. to report her son was unresponsive. Police found her son lying on the living room floor with no pulse and cold to the touch. Tenen told police she attempted to wake her son for school that morning, but he was unresponsive, and she carried him from his bedroom to the living room, the complaint states. Right? Police and paramedics at the scene and medical examiner's office investigator each described the boy's body as being ice cold and very cold, as if he had been outside. Despite the efforts of the police and paramedics, the boy was pronounced dead at 8:14 a.m., according to the complaint. Tenen told Brooklyn Park detectives that her son came home from school sick, lethargic, and without an appetite the day before. However, staff members at the boy's school told investigators that he had been playing and jumping on a trampoline, the complaint states. Police reported that the boy appeared to have urinated in his pajamas, and a police sergeant noticed a puddle of frozen liquid in the attached garage. When police came back to Tenen's home with a search warrant a week after the death, the liquid was gone, the complaint states. Medical examiner's autopsy found no anatomical cause for the victim's death, and on the boy's back there were multiple lesions and scars, which a doctor stated were indicative of physical abuse, according to the complaint. Months after the boy's death, his siblings told foster parents more about what happened. One of the children said the boy got into trouble on January 31st, 2018, and was told by Tenen to sit outside in the garage. Tenen locked the garage, and the boy was left outside for the night. The boy was found unable to breathe the next morning, the complaint states. Man. Officer Faulkner, man, generous contribution, brother. Really appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Hope you're well. We definitely got a wrap. Winston, what's going on? Lee's Ways, what's up? Ragnar. Man, Brother Malika, Blade Runner. This is, yeah, man. This is some ridiculous shit. It really is. This boy was literally left outside to freeze to death in the garage. And then this is in Minnesota. I have no idea what the temperature would have been, but either way, it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So when I did a few weeks ago, the report on black child maltreatment, one of the things I talked about were the statistics around child abuse, child homicide, you know, and basically what the 2020 report suggested was that you have a cross section. So you kind of got to do one of those old Venn diagrams. So you have a cross section where parents are the predominant killers of children, women are the predominant killers of children, and I forget what the third category was. It was parents. It was children. It was parents. It was women, and it was black people. So in other words, black people had the most child homicides. So when you overlap those three Venn diagrams, right, you get a sense of who tends to, and which is logical because at the end of the day, women tend to be more responsible for child care in that respect. So the numbers are likely to be higher, and they are, as far as that's concerned. And for people who doubted how that can happen and whether or not that's true, I got a lot of doubters, male and female, asking for the citations, which is fine. I provided it. But at the end of the day, they couldn't seem to imagine a scenario. Well, there you go. That's one. And the interesting thing is it was centered around discipline, right? The disciplining of a boy. And when we start to talk about this idea of eliminating and denouncing the nuclear family, which in many ways in the black community is really a dig at black men. Nobody's talking about denouncing and getting rid of the nuclear family as it pertains to mothers. Nobody's talking about that. Definitely not children. They're really talking about black men. This push to do that. And we first saw this publicly stated aloud when dealing with BLM, looking at their website and seeing their, kind of pro-LGBT push to eliminate the traditional nuclear family. But we understand it for what it was. It was a purposeful dig at not only black men, but the very idea of the role of a father. And so I find it interesting that when we start to talk about discipline in the black community, we get all kinds of stories about how far we as black people tend to go as far as discipline is concerned. But nobody really wants to talk about mothers disciplining boys without the presence of a father and what the impact of that is. Now, there's no mention in this article of a father. That doesn't mean he wasn't in the home. Could simply mean that his name wasn't brought up. I don't know. More than likely, statistically speaking, he's probably not there. And she disciplined her son on her own by leaving him in the garage all night. By the way, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, share, subscribe, join, donate, support the channel if you would, so we can have these kind of discussions about the things that people don't want to talk about. What's up, BGS? Good to see you in here, as usual. Stuart D. Knight, what's up? Yeah, this shit is sad. But let's get to it. So, y'all know the deal. I was going to look at both Chris Brown and Ryan Coogler today. And I found it interesting that, you have situations that these brothers are into where they both have, evidence. One providing it himself, the other one kind of having people around him provide it. But either way, both issues, both situations, really challenge the conventional narrative about black men. Right? So let's take a look. So first and foremost, we deal with Chris Brown's situation. So, Chris recently got into a situation where he was yet again accused of what he tends to get accused for. This is not the first time. Initially, we're familiar with him in terms of the accusations around Rihanna and abuse, even though there was documentation to come out that suggested that was bidirectional, right? The violence went both ways, but somehow, her violence was eliminated because by and large, we don't think women are capable of violence, despite evidence to the contrary. Now, in this particular situation, he was accused of RAPE, right? And the idea around this is something that men have been talking about in whispered huddles for years, and that is the capacity for certain people to engage in false accusations. And one of the things we hear from professional feminists is that this rarely happens. This is, Such a rare occurrence. It's not even, it's not even plausible, right? And when we do see evidence of it, it's kind of dismissed and swept under the rug for the sake of the image of woman, the image of womanhood, the sanctity that we associate with it in the popular imagination. So when there's evidence of it, it just kind of disappears. So in this particular case, he was accused, and let's see, he provided some evidence. And this is all over, media, it's all over social media, so it's not hard to find. One thing I will do is I will try to play some of the voice recordings that he had as evidence. So here we go. It might be a little hard to hear, but let's see what we can do here.
Like signals. You're like reading the messages and stuff, and you haven't blocked me yet, so I'm guessing you don't hate me. I just want to see you again. I mean, just answer the phone and then you just hung up. Like, just let me know. Like, if you want me to leave you alone, I definitely will. But I really just want to fuck with you again.
Yeah. So after that, he writes, "No more dragging me through the mud. Clearly, you can all see the cap. Now let's see if the media will keep that same energy they had trying to destroy me to run the real story. Me and my team are taking legal action on the situation. You don't play with people's lives like that. Thanks, Team Breezy." And then from there, he went on to, or the article, one of the articles I read went on to point out that her legal team left her because she didn't provide them evidence of any of this. And so all of this, of course, serves to discredit her in public as far as that goes. But, you know, it still hasn't led to the larger discussion that I think we need to have on the impact of false accusations, the extent to which there's not enough pushback against false accusations, and the degree to which these things can be levied without much, without much resistance, and yet can destroy lives even with no evidence. And this is something that men are keenly aware of because it doesn't take much. And as a matter of fact, in many instances, the person making the accusation is protected. They have their identity protected. So here you have a circumstance where anybody can make an accusation in popular media, no evidence required. Their names aren't even exposed. And even if the person being accused has an alibi or evidence that more than suggests but proves that they're not guilty, the situation just goes away, right? The accuser suffers no penalty other than they're no longer really mentioned. They don't have to pay the price for any of that, right? Yet and still, person's life can be utterly destroyed, professionally speaking, and that's long before a court is even involved in the situation. And this is just a completely unfair balance of power in terms of this, because this can come from anywhere, and we've seen this with countless celebrities. I mean, which I find problematic in and of itself. It's never like the dude loading groceries at the store. It's always somebody in a position of significance, as if that's not a factor in this, right? But we're supposed to all pretend that false accusations don't happen, right? And then when you factor in that everyday men can speak to being falsely accused or speak to being threatened to be falsely accused if they don't fall in line with whatever somebody demands of them. See, those kind of discussions don't make it to the fore either, right? And really, what the core of it is you've given, well, women constitute more than half of the population, but you've given one gender complete access to unfettered belief from the public, the capacity to destroy somebody and their reputation and their business, income, and everything else on the basis of a word with no framework whatsoever for vetting, scrutinizing, any of it. And when you add social media into that, you're talking about just a massive social guillotine where heads can come off with no kind of reservation, and there's no system of checks and balances in place to provide that. Hell, you can win in a court case and still lose in the court of public opinion. They'll just say, if this situation were different, Chris didn't have evidence, if he took her to court and was proven innocent, in court, he could still be canceled socially because people chose to not believe him. People chose to believe that he just used his money and influence to get a great lawyer, and they attacked this poor downtrodden woman, so on and so forth. We don't have enough narratives to make sense of the various possibilities that can come out of these different kinds of situations. We only have one narrative: male guilt, female innocence, and if he gets out of it, he's rich and powerful and use that to leverage and intimidate an innocent person. But when it's clearly and just unquestionably problematic and fraught with difficulty, proven wrong altogether, what do? We move on to the next subject as if it didn't happen. And men that call it out and raise question about whether or not this is emblematic of something greater, something that needs to be examined, something that needs to be questioned, and something that should require a better system of scrutiny. You're sexist. You're misogynist. You hate women and you don't care what happens to them. Right? All these kind of shaming, dismissive gestures that deflect from the point. And the point has to be, at what point do men get access to fair treatment in regard to whether or not they're innocent or guilty of a crime? So we used to have this idea that you were innocent until proven guilty. Obviously, for many of us, we know we're guilty until proven innocent. And even then, we still may be ignored. But this is compounded by being black males. And being black males adds to the problem in such a significant way, we don't know how to make sense of it, right? Because when you associate black and male with a given situation, Malcolm, appreciate the cash app, the idea is somehow that we are guilty simply because the situation happened, or happened in the sense that the accusation was made. That's, tantamount to guilt. They're synonymous. There's nothing else there to be talked about. We're guilty. And Chris Brown can speak to this. This is why he starts his statement with saying, "No more dragging me through the mud." Clearly, we can see the cap. Now, let's see if the media will keep that same energy they had trying to destroy me. He knows they won't. All they'll do is move on to the next story. That's the closest thing to a public apology the man's going to get. Right? That's the closest thing he's going to get to it. So that in and of itself is highly problematic. And again, as black men, this is kind of what many of us are familiar with. Many of us know that if we're accused of something, especially at the job or anything of that nature, even if you're innocent, you're going to go through a lot of shit just trying to get through the situation. I mean, I said this before. I was watching one of Samuel Jackson's movies a couple weeks ago, and he played a character, and he's I won't go through the movie, but he said a line that I thought was incredibly important. He said, I've had to deal with a lot of shit just from being black and nearby. Right? Meaning you don't have to be guilty of something. Just being in the situation, being present is enough in many people's minds to secure your guilt. When it comes to Chris Brown, this has been, I think there's even people at this point that purposely look for situations that they can use to draw a question toward him. Because not only is he a black male, not only is he famous with money, so he's a target in that sense, but also because he's had a track record of situations. Another one is just going to make him look guilty, regardless of whether or not he is. So the evidence became extremely important in his situation. But let's go to the next. All right, this is a recent one that people have been talking about. And although I'm not really one to chase celebrity, I do find these situations important. So this is Ryan Coogler, as many of us know, right? Famous director of the Black Panther. Did some beautiful work. I was literally just showing my students Fruitvale Station. Right? It's one of the assignments they're looking at now. So he's done some beautiful work. Some of the stuff he's done with Creed, Michael B. Jordan is actually quite good. I found that even as early as Fruitvale Station, he has a talent for telling black men's stories and even dealing with some of the minutia of black male life that doesn't always make it to the screen. If you haven't seen the scene with Michael B. Jordan and the pit bull, the symbolism is ridiculous. Black Panther I've had problems with. We've talked about this at length. I've written about it. It is what it is. I'm not thrilled at all the decisions he's made, but I wouldn't take away from the man's talent. But if you take that scene from Fruitvale Station of Michael B. Jordan, right, and this pit bull that runs up to him, and he plays with it, and not but a moment later, It's run over in the middle of the street. Driver doesn't even stop. Nobody cares. Very, symbolic of black male life, right? And we all know, if you've seen Fruitvale Station, the reason that that's that much more important is because the very character that Michael B. Jordan is playing is dismissed and overlooked as far as the quality and value of his life in much the same way. Thankfully, there are plenty of people that took to social media to make sure the case didn't go away, but he still had to lose his life over nothing. Well, not necessarily going to the same extreme, Ryan Coogler went through something very recently that was very emblematic, very reflective of the pit bull experience in a very different yet similar way. Let's see. You can hopefully hear some of this, but I thought this interesting and important to share. Here we go.
Hey, man. Do me a favor, man. Come this way. Whoa. Put your hand behind your back. Whoa. Put your hand behind your back. Hands down my back. Got it. Is there any reason y'all doing this, bro? Give me 1 second. Hold on.
Good job, man.
What's the problem? I need everybody's name.
Go right now, y'all.
I need everybody's name. You know what I'm saying? I need to find out who made that call in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I
It
mean?
came from the bank.
Yeah.
Came from the
I need to
bank.
find out who made the
That's
call.
fine. That's fine. You have no right to do so.
Yeah,
But
Can I speak to a manager in an office somewhere? Have you ever considered doing
I'm
something
gonna
like that?
consider it now that y'all
Okay.
fucking drew villains on me.
Yeah.
I was trying to take money out. But up to this point, at every Bank of America I ever gone to in my entire fucking life, just never happened.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
So y'all explaining y'all perspective, right?
Yeah.
Y'all the ones with guns and vests.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
What's my perspective? What's my perspective?
I know you
At the bank, she never said it was a fucking problem, bro.
Yeah.
I said, hey, is that gonna be okay with you? She said, yeah. I put my own card in, put my own pin in. She asked to see my ID. I gave it to her.
Yeah.
And she goes in the back, and I'm waiting for the and then the people keep coming out, hey, they taking care of you. Everything's it's taking a little while. Next thing I hear fucking Glocks.
Yeah.
I hear Glocks getting pulled out. That's what I hear.
you're a Glock.
I hear Glocks getting pulled out from unholstering. Hey, sir, can I talk to you for a minute?
Mhm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So you see my perspective.
Yeah.
All right. So we know. Now he says the situation's resolved between him and the bank. I personally do hope that he sues, but we'll see what happens from there. But the interesting part of this that has so many people up in arms is not just that the police were called and that nobody verbalized to him directly that there was any issue or any question whatsoever as to his identity. He put in his PIN number. He provided all the documentation that he's normally expected to provide. Had no indication that there was any problem. You saw the surprise in his voice, or you heard it in his voice. You kind of saw it in his face, at least above the eye line, because he's wearing a mask. You could tell he was completely shocked while he was surrounded with cops who had drew him down, right? But in the midst of that, being taken out, you saw a black woman who says, "Good job, officer." Now, we don't know if that's the same woman that called, or at least I don't. Some of you might, or not. But either way, right, that's been one of the hot points to this issue. The extent to which he couldn't even get a modicum of, it's not even about trust. It just, just a dignified, basic human level of respect by, instead of assuming that he's a bank robber, if anything, because apparently he wrote a note where he was, to my understanding, trying to withdraw about $12,000, and he asked for them to count the money discreetly, in another area out of view. He handed her a note requesting that. Apparently, she didn't read the note and assumed that it was a robbery. So the basic respect of at least reading the note, let alone, engaging him, or just taking a moment to say, well, he just provided all the evidence we normally require of, a customer coming in. So these kind of basic things, right, were the assumption that he is a threat. He is the pit bull and from his own film. And the degree to which both he and Chris Brown, right, continue to be seen as the pit bull. And I find it interesting because I used to hear people say, well, as long as black men have money, they have notoriety, they have status, they don't tend to suffer these situations. Word. Is that what happens? Okay. Notice how it took nothing more than a mask for all that to be erased. And it's not like everybody knows who Ryan Coogler is by sight. It's not, no. Or Chris Brown for that matter, but it doesn't fucking matter. At the end of the day, these men, in the eyes of the people they were dealing with, were either targets, threats, or somebody to be used for another person's benefit. They were targets in and of themselves, right? And with Coogler, that could have ended badly at any moment. If he'd have gotten upset in the bank, which he technically had every right to be, it could have been the loss of his life. If somebody would have misunderstood one of his movements, if he didn't comply in a certain kind of way, and hell, sometimes we know people comply and still get shot. There's no rhyme or reason to this in many a situation. At the end of the day, this man could have lost his life over what? Right? Over what? Well, one of the things I can say I was glad to see in both situations was the use of evidence. And even the situation dealing with the child homicide that I read about earlier, I was glad that there was evidence that could be at least pointed out, evidence that suggested what the truth of the situation was. So even though this boy had to die for no real reason, at least this woman can be put in prison for her behavior. What's up? Great. I9. What's going on? Says the irony is that he elevated black women in his film, and when he was being taken down, a black woman disrespected him. Yeah, that's ill. That's absolutely ill. I mean, when you look at the Dora Milaje for the comic book heads, you're talking about a creation that doesn't come about until fairly recently in the history of the Black Panther, the lore. The character goes back to the 1960s. The Dora Milaje are very new. And if anything, they're written and created by black men. Now, black men have been at war in the comic industry with white men for representational space. So in doing so, they take one of the most popular black characters, surround him with powerful black women, although they were more like president's security guards. Somehow by the time you get to the movie, they're elevated to their own damn army. But elevated by who? Ryan Coogler. But hey, right? But what I was saying, though, is I'm happy to see that evidence played a role in their exoneration. And more than just their exoneration, public exoneration, which forces people to come to terms with the assumptions they make about the black pit bull, the black man who doesn't have to be doing anything to be perceived as a threat, doesn't have to be doing anything to be identified as somebody that needs to be taken down, have guns drawn on them, needs to be taken to court and locked up, right? For nothing. I don't even want to ask how many brothers got evidence, phone evidence, audio files, things of that nature on things that they were accused of, right? I know if I ask my listeners how many of them do, it'll be a deluge. It'll be a tidal wave of brothers who could tell me about situations where they were either threatened to be, accused of something or were actually accused. And we're talking about everything from, false accusations of RAPE all the way to dealing with family court and child custody. Don't get me started asking these brothers for evidence because it'll be a never-ending show. But this is the reality of black male life. And nobody wants to talk about it. Cameron, appreciate that support. So I'm glad both brothers were able to kind of see their way out of it. But I would definitely push that, you stay on guard, fellas. Stay on guard. Have the smartphone ready. Put it right where it can record what needs to be recorded. Because at this point in time, can you imagine what would have happened to Chris Brown this time around with no evidence? Right? Just on the whimsical word of somebody who's trying to catch a payday. It would have been an uphill battle. And that's particularly infuriating when you know you're innocent, but you don't have the faith of the public. And truth be told, you don't have to be Chris Brown to not have the faith of the public. Being black and male is enough. But you got to fight an uphill battle against something that you know is a lie or misrepresentation. And as far as the public is concerned, you're already guilty before you even interviewed in a public sense, public context. You know, for many, Coogler just walking down the street, just another brother. Just another brother. And too many brothers have even been locked up behind this for not having evidence, even though they were innocent. And they just go to jail. And we know the evidence of that because when you look at the organizations around exonerating black men, particularly using DNA evidence, over 50% of those who've been exonerated have been black males. So really, what these situations point to, from the little boy to Chris Brown to Ryan Coogler to all the men who've been exonerated by the Innocence Project, is that black men are probably far more innocent than people assume. More than probably. They're far more innocent than people assume. But if you don't have direct evidence on the case you're dealing with, as far as people concerned, your guilt is secured simply because the accusation was made. So as I can say, as Brother Malika says in the comment section, keep your heads on a swivel, keep your cameras ready to go, hit record. I don't care if it's just the slightest indication that something may be going wrong. You can always delete it later if it's nothing. But keep your evidence ready, man. Keep your camera ready. Be prepared to protect yourself. I mean, Patrice O'Neal used to joke about this years ago. He used to talk about going around buying things in stores and leaving receipts at different points, starting arguments with the cashier just to make sure he's remembered, right? And he's joking, but he's not. Dave Chappelle made similar kinds of jokes, things of that nature. At the end of the day, this whole question of black male exoneration, black male innocence, has been one since at least 1619. But it's taken on a whole new turn in the era of smart media, smartphones, social media. What's up, Yesha? Appreciate the support, brother. Taking on a whole new meaning. Because now, at the very least, we have the potential, we have the capacity to influence public sentiment before it has to see the inside of a courtroom where none of the jurors look like you. And sometimes, even if you're proven innocent and none of the jurors look like you, people still consider you to be guilty. Don't believe me? Go check out Nate Parker. He wasn't even famous at the time that happened. He was a student, found innocent by a jury that was all white except for one person, to my memory. Right? Years later, this man is a whole different person, and he's still considered guilty. Right? Imagine being permanently considered guilty for something that happened to you when you were, a teenager. And despite that, you got off in an environment like a courtroom where there's no exoneration for most black men in a courtroom. I mean, at the end of the day, we go to jail left and right. They don't go out their way to find us to be innocent in situations like that. He's found innocent, let go, and he's still treated like he's guilty. Years later. Doesn't matter, right? But at least with Chris and Ryan, right? They're able to provide video evidence that exonerates them in the public imagination. So that being said, as I said, stay aware, fellas. Keep your cameras ready. Don't ever let your eyes slip off of what's going on around you, because you never know what these people are in this for and what they're trying to do. So straight up, y'all. Wish you guys well. I look forward to hearing your comments. Peace.